The rain wasn't. Oh, it was something like $50. And I said, I want no idea.
Not you, unless you start coughing.
I didn't want to carry it. Then after I left, I was like, I should have bought it. Should have bought it.
Northwest Highway Medical Field.
I don't know what the name of that typewriter. Do you remember?
Oliver. Oliver Batwing typewriter. It's cool looking.
That'd be nice.
If I would have known, I would have bought it for you. Sold it to you for $100.
Right?
$50 delivery
He
fee.
collects them.
Yeah.
Oh, I've always wanted one.
They're cool.
I don't know. Grandma didn't know. So I can't say one for her.
Saw one in the basement the other day.
I don't know the slide run across walls.
Jeff's gonna take off my program.
He must not be there. The chair's not there.
I know.
Space up.
Yeah.
You might be watching. Yeah, I know.
I don't know where's. Is the mayor here? No, so I don't need a different chair.
And trying to be considerate.
Good.
Will teach me.
You
always have.
This is all mine.
It's your space.
We're getting underway in about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Good evening and welcome to the Defiance City Council meeting for tonight, January 25th, 2022. As usual, before we get underway, we have a local pastor who will open us up in prayer. Pastor Leonard from the Church of the Nazarene is here to be our guest this evening and open us up. Thanks for being our guest this evening.
Privileged to be here. Thank you. Our Father, as we come into your presence tonight, we want to thank you for the privilege of being in your rule and your authority. And coming into this meeting of leaders of our community, we pray for your wisdom to be upon them. We all in this room are longing for the day that this COVID crisis will be over and things move on ahead as we would like them to. Most of all, Father, we pray for wisdom tonight to be granted to these, your leaders, those that will be speaking to this body of citizens. We pray that you'll be with them and allow them to speak openly and may the business come to a conclusion without a lot of conflict. We pray most of all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let the record show that all members of council are present except for Steve Corbett this evening. He's feeling under the weather.
I'll make a motion to excuse Mr. Cope.
We have a motion to excuse Mr. Corbett. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Engel. All those in favor of excusing Mr. Corbett this evening, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'll let him stay home, fluids and some rest, and get feeling better. Would you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing up this evening, before we get down to too much legislation, we have a meeting of the whole this evening to discuss an update on the sewer program and fire operations. Mr. Leonard.
Yes. Before I get started, the mayor gives his regrets. He's a little under the weather as well. So we'll wait for him to come back following week. For some time, I think that the city has been working on what's called the old program, where we had said in evaluating that first phase of our program, we didn't feel that we were making significant progress to the point where we were having big impacts. And what I mean by that is the city has already spent some $30 to $40 million on improvements to its plant and to its infrastructure. And part of that plan has always been to really provide help in water quality. That means making the Maumee River a better place. Well, most people that you ask, if you would ask the question, what's been the impact? They can't tell you what the impact of our program's been on the Maumee River. And for the most part, I would tell you that you couldn't see the impact that Fort Wayne, Indiana has had on the Maumee River. And anybody that's actually uses the Maumee River to provide a means of dumping its waste and getting rid of its waste can provide you what kind of impact. So with that said, I think that we've been working with the EPA on a new program. And part of that program has been to really kind of shift gears and strategies as to how we would attack this problem. And we've had numerous discussions over the years. We've worked with a consultant. The gentleman's name is John Lyons from Strand and Associates. We met him, I want to say maybe 3 years ago. We liked his approach and strategies in terms of looking at water quality, because when you look at wastewater plants and you look at the mandates that are placed on these wastewater plants, it's important to see the impacts on water quality issues. In other words, you want to be good stewards of the land, and you want to be good stewards of good health, and you don't want to be polluting, and that's something that the city of Defiance doesn't want to do as well. And I think that if you've been reading the news, you will see that there are places in Northwest Ohio that's had its challenges, and those challenges are around the Toledo area. And I think for the most part, I can tell you that we have a permit, and it's a process where we can actually, our system becomes surcharged, and we are allowed to put so much surcharge of our system into the Maumee River. We're allowed to do that. Most towns in Ohio are allowed to actually do that in what they call 4 CSOs per year. And the city has looked at that program, and what people don't understand about the 4 CSOs, the real question that is not being asked of these officials are, it's fine to have 4 overflows, but the question is how much impact are those overflows having within the system? Are we putting 200,000 gallons in? Are we putting 1 million gallons in? And the EPA, as it's written now, worries about 4 CSO events. And I think for the most part, we have questioned that because we feel like the amount of volume is something that's really important as well. And so we've had to adopt a strategy, a new strategy with our CSO program. That strategy actually encompasses what I would call 5 different attributes. And the first attribute that really we're looking at within the program is wastewater treatment plant improvements. In other words, we have these different processes that you will see at the plant. Some are old and antiquated. They need improvement. And part of our strategy is to make sure that we make those improvements to the system. The other, for example, I think that most of you have actually, I think you toured the Kingsbury pump station. And if you were at the bottom of that plant and you looked at the screening and the bars at the bottom of that, it's a you've seen some of those bars and how they are set up. Well, we're looking at new screening processes for that particular plant. And we're looking to make improvements to make it a bit more efficient. If you were down there, it's sort of this old antiquated system where they got to go down and pick the screens apart and haul up the waste all the way up those flights of stairs. And we're going to make improvements in that area to help that. The other thing that we're looking at within the parameters of the plan itself is there's a real need to create a place where some of these haulers of septic can actually dump into the system. And we're going to try to create a septic dumping system within the wastewater plant, which will provide revenue as well. And we want to create the kind of process where we can help those people from the outside come in and actually dump their sewage, and we can treat it. Because if you look at our overall capacity of the plant, we have plenty of capacity to do that. So the first phase and the first attribute that we're really looking at is plant improvements. We've considered really adopting what's called an EQ basin, where if the system becomes so surcharged, we could actually dump into the basin out at the plant and then slowly bleed in the system where now we're sort of storing it and then releasing it. That's a concept that's being looked at the plant as well. The second, and I'll give you price tags when I go through them all. The second attribute is what's called asset management plans. And asset management would be to make improvements to the infrastructure, certain parts of the sewer system. For example, you were at Kingsbury, but what you didn't see underground is there's a pressurized system called a force main that actually goes from that plant straight out to the wastewater plant, and it's actually pressurized and sent to that plant by force main, and that force main is very, very old, and it needs to be improved or it needs to be totally changed. My guess is that we'll probably look at it and relocate it in a different area and use it while we can, but that improvement to that force main will be critical to get the sewage from the Kingsbury pump station all the way out to the plant. That's an important piece of the asset management plan that we'll have to look at. If you look at the Kingsbury pump station, the one thing that you should have noticed is all that flow from the north side comes down the north side hill. It comes across the river. It goes across the Auglaize River by the fort grounds and is sent to the Kingsbury pump station and then is force mained all the way out to the plant. So that the flow itself and the flows that come into the Kingsbury pump station are critical, and they're critical because most of the flow goes to that Kingsbury pump station. And it can be a pinch point if the system becomes surcharged. So a lot of what we're trying to do with this strategy and making improvements is really improving the infrastructure, whether we can store it, whether we can take those combined sewers and get the stormwater out of it so we don't have to treat it, but reduce the flows. And we call it like drying the system up, where we're drying the system up within the framework of the infrastructure so that we can have less flow, sending it out to the plant. And that less flow means less pressure, less electricity cost on pumping, and those kind of things. So you also have to consider the overall strategy of making sure that you're trying to find the most optimal and efficient, effective levels of running the system to the plant. The third item that we're looking at is obviously Cso Reduction Programs. And that means looking at areas within this city to take out the flows and taking out the flows in such a way that you're reducing combined systems and creating a sanitary system and a storm system. If you look at and see what we've done, like on East High Street, most people were asking the question, Well, okay, why did you make improvements like that? Well, those improvements were really focused and centered around other strategies within the CSO program. We actually had a lot of flow and infiltration into the system. We had water line problems. So what we decided to do is use the sewer system in such a way that we were going to separate the system, put storm systems in, change the water line out, make improvements that way. And it was a perfect opportunity for us to do that. And obviously, in doing that, we had to dig up the road. We put the new system in for road improvements. So it worked overall very well because it was one of those things where bang for our buck, and we had other problems within that area that we fixed along with the sewer system. But the sewer system was a catalyst behind that program. And most people don't realize that, but it actually was. The other thing that we're looking at, and these are the things that as we move forward are a bit more creative. And these things are what's called Watershed Projects. And where we focused mainly on our own infrastructure, and we've done things like make plant improvements. Now what we're interested in doing is really kind of going and thinking outside the box with these creative initiatives to really look at the different things within the tributaries. For example, we haven't really submitted anything to EPA, but what we've done in good faith is we've adopted green infrastructure programs where most recently the city has purchased property along Old 424 down by Burning Tree through a grant. And what we will do is we will create the kind of green infrastructure and wetlands that will take some of the flows and will trap nutrients and release them back to the river. So it's like a nutrient reduction program and using plants to filter out the nutrients within the system and releasing back into the Maumee. If you look and see what we've done at the reservoir site, we've actually taken farm property out. We worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we actually have a nutrient reduction program where they're actually studying, and they will have data for us. We're probably going in year 2 of that program. It's a 5-year program, and we're working with the Army Corps for them to analyze exactly what these plants do and how much reduction we can get with nutrient reduction. So that data will be very important for future projects, or if we find that it's not beneficial enough, then obviously we'll make some changes and we can put the land back into use for farming. Those innovative, creative ideas are things that we're doing to looking outside the box by creating different programs. There's a program at a relatively low cost right now that you can actually take a concrete box, put steel slag in it, run water through it, and trap nutrients that way. And it's done by a professor whose name is Chad Penn from Ohio State University. He's been very successful with it. So we're looking at creative, new ideas on how to deal with problems with nutrient reduction to help water quality within the Maumee River. The final piece of it is green infrastructure projects. And if you look at what we can do there is you have a property right now on Summit Street. It's the old Toledo Edison building, if you recall that, which runs from Summit all the way over to Ottawa Avenue. And if you look at the pavement there, there's a lot of runoff. And we're looking to take that runoff, take it out of a combined system, reduce the flow to the plant, and look to see if we can reduce that flow enough where it has a meaningful relationship to the plant. those are things that we're doing. We've considered taking Riverside Park, and if you look at the back part of the wooded area there, there are things that we can do to divert the water flow in the Au Glaize and actually subvert it into more of the land, filter out those areas, putting planting areas in there. It's generally been unused, but you can put different infrastructure in there. That's something that's being considered today. So we're taking kind of this traditional approach, plant improvements, creating better infrastructure, making improvements to the infrastructure, taking these innovative concepts and using them in such a way that we will submit a plan to the EPA, and that plan is due by March 1st of this year. And submitting such a plan and pushing it forward, getting the attention of the EPA to say, look, we want to do something much more than just separate a system. We believe this is beneficial to the environment. But again, I think the challenge that we're faced with is getting approval and getting approval for the plan. Because as we sit here and we've had our discussions internally, the question is, if we don't get the plan approved and if we don't get enough benefit from it, you know, it's something that we really can't put on the taxpayers or the ratepayers to really push these initiatives if they're not going to be beneficial to us. So that's the challenge with EPA, to get the approval, to look and see what we've done. And the price tag on all of this, and the total price tag is $39.3 million, of which, if I break it down, those plant improvements are somewhere around $11.5 million. The asset management, where you're replacing the pump station at Kingsbury or the force main and other improvements in the infrastructure, $21.5 million. The Cso Reduction Projects, $4 million. Watershed Projects at $670,000, and green infrastructure projects at $1.65 million, totaling $39.3 million. Now, that's a lot of money. We have had numerous discussions, and it's negotiating that price and trying to work those numbers down. And we don't want to put any more on the ratepayers here than we have to. But over this time, I think we've developed some great relationships with people like the city of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We've had numerous discussions with Fort Wayne. Obviously, their flow's coming to us. We've worked with them on sampling and taking samples and working together on sharing that information. So I think you'll be seeing us incorporate other partners as well as we move forward. But overall, this is a basic framework of a CSO program that I think we continue to work with. It's a work in progress still. And as we move forward, we will try to gain the approval of EPA, and we'll move forward with it. So with that, I will entertain any questions, anything anybody may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Leonard? Mr. Uresti?
So for the most part, what you're looking at is for the March 1st, 2022 presentation or whatever, you're looking at more like the ideas that you presented, those 5 bullet points of what we're doing. And the other one is the data, like from maybe the flow meters of where we're experiencing the overflows and so on and so forth, to put together a good plan for them to accept that we're doing something to be in compliance with what they want.
Correct. Here's the key piece of this, and it's called the model, and it's modeling. And what modeling is that we have brought a gentleman on who actually monitors the flow everywhere in this city. And what you're seeing with that model is, what we've done is he's modeled this, and he's modeled it in such a way that there are what's called weirs in the system. A weir is nothing but a gate that if you get the system surcharged, it spills over that gate and it goes to an outfall and it goes out to the river, okay? Well, if you adjust the weir and you can move it up, these weirs have not been adjusted. So we've adjusted the weirs and moved the gates up, and it's given us a tremendous amount more of capacity within the system, which means saving money. And that model and deciding where those weirs are going to be placed is a key component because that model has to be accurate. That model is key because that is the catalyst and the heartbeat of the program. Think about that. Because if that model's wrong, then we got problems. That model has to be right. And if you want to know why it's taken us a long time is we've had issues with that model and we have to get it right. That's very key.
Oh, Mr. Esty.
Nobody else? Oh. I like the numbers because, as you know, and most on council know, the initial compliance that we had to do with the EPA was about $120 million of improvements that we had to do
Right.
throughout our community. If our dollars at this point are between $30 and $40 million, and the new projections are an additional 39.3 with all the innovative ideas that's going on and stuff like that, we're looking good.
Yeah, but let me say this, okay? Because I don't want to be, they seem to change the goalpost all the time, okay? I mean, you get something done and suddenly something else, they want to regulate something else. And I think the strategy that we can adopt is something that it leaves yourself open to being able to do some other things if you can. I think that one thing that we must look at in question, and I've questioned this along with other people within our organization, is the question is, are they going to make us regulate stormwater? That's the question that I have. And that's a big deal. Right now, our strategy is set on doing some separation, but taking that stormwater, letting it go to the outfalls. But when I talk about people like Dr. Chad Penn, those are the kind of programs that if you run stormwater through his system, you can reduce some of the nutrients and some of the other things that might be able to trap some of these chemicals and help the situation. So I think we want to leave ourselves open to that concept. I think we're just trying to diversify the system to be able to adapt to other things as well. I think that's important.
Mrs. Crutch.
I know that this is basically dealing with the Maumee because the EPA is really strictly watching the Maumee. And I know you said something about Riverside for Oglays. Is there more that they're thinking about the Oglays? Because I know many people are concerned about the Oglays River since it's basically in the state of Ohio where the Maumee comes from.
Well, I think the one thing that this city is trying to embrace is being the leader of looking at green infrastructure and this watershed approach. I don't think you'll see many cities, if any, doing it in Ohio. And I think when you say, I hope they do something in the Oglays, it's really critical to gain partners, okay? Partner with Fort Wayne, partner with Toledo, partner with Lima, partner with Ottawa, Findlay, because those places have impacts on the Oglays and the Maumee. And I think the whole point is, if you really want to get something done in terms of water quality, then do it with partners. Don't do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself. You have to do it with partners.
Any other questions or follow-up? Mr. Waxler.
I know you've been talking to Fort Wayne. Have you talked to anybody from Lima or Findlay or any in that area? I know Ottawa and them's got a lot of runoff. I mean, they got a lot of.
Yeah. Mayor David Berger has been very aggressive in sitting down and looking to see what other regulations they're putting on us. And it's very difficult for him because where he actually discharges his waste, it's not in the same place. It may go to the Au Glaze, okay, but his challenges are very different than Defiance's challenges. The one thing that I like about Defiance, and I think the competitive, what I would call the real advantages of maybe changing a program, is our location. We're at the confluence of two rivers. We encompass like 6,600 square miles of farmland. It doesn't have to be just working with municipal governments. It can be working with the farmers. And I think that if given the opportunity, I think that we can obviously have an impact. And I don't think you don't hear very often of municipalities working with the farm community. And I think we're going to have to do that. And if we can do that and work with them, then I think we can have a better impact on water quality within the Maumee. I think everybody wants the same thing. How nice would it be to see clear water in the Maumee and the Au Glaze River? Is it possible? Yeah, I think it is. Is it going to take a while? Yeah, it will. But Lima and those other entities will be important.
All right.
Everybody needs to kind of work to work together and do, promote the same
I
kind of
just wondered if they was
initiatives.
on board with the
we've
Watershed
met.
program and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. They're looking at, this is called an integrated approach, and Lima has adopted an integrated approach as well.
Any further questions, comments?
Thank you. I'll keep you posted as we move forward.
Thank you. And we also have Fire Chief Willitzer here this evening. It's nice to see you.
Good evening. Kind of here tonight to kind of continue our talk that we had at the budgetary meetings earlier this year and give council a better overview of the operations of the department in 2021. Coming up this week in your package, you'll get our annual report, which will go a little more in depth with some of the reporting. But I think the division, and you have a packet, there's some handouts I gave you. I'll get some of the highlights out of that packet. The division has always worked in the aspect that the community dictates and puts the demand on what they need, and the department fulfills those demands. In the future, it's going to be the community that's going to put the demands on the department, and what those demands are will be whether the baby boomers are getting to a point that they're using the EMS services for care. We've dealt with the COVID over the last couple of years. All those demands change how we provide the service. So what I wanted to do is just refresh you on what the department is, give you a little bit of information on personnel, where our run volume ended up for 2021, and then have a little discussion on succession planning for the department. Our department provides fire service to the city of Defiance and also to Defiance Township under a contract. That's approximately 32 square miles of area run out of the central station, and I'll throw time and time again with a minimum staffing of 6 personnel. We also provide automatic aid to Highland and Noble Townships, which means the same time they get dispatched for a fire, our personnel get dispatched to that fire to assist them. They do the same for us. When we get dispatched, they get dispatched as automatic aid. We also provide mutual aid to the 9 other remaining departments in the county who operate township fire departments. And if they need an aerial or an engine or a squad, we respond to assist those individuals. From an EMS perspective, we will service, which sometimes is referred to Advanced Life Support or ALS, to the city of Defiance, Defiance Township, and Noble Township. Both of those are under a contract for services. That brings our total square miles up to 60 square miles, or a rough population of about 19,600 citizens in those areas that we provide EMS service to. Current staffing levels, on the third page, I gave you a breakdown of our current staffing levels, an organizational chart of the department. We have 3 shifts of 8 personnel. Each shift is made up with a captain and a lieutenant, 6 firefighters, and then our minimum daily staffing is 6, which means that if 2 personnel are on approved leave, it takes us to 6. An individual sick leave, anything that would take it below 6, we hire back to maintain that 6 personnel on duty, of which 1 individual has to be an officer, either a captain or a lieutenant. If the staffing falls due to emergency calls below 4 on-duty personnel, then we start a recall process, recall off-duty personnel, and we use a code A system, which is over the radio. They do a code A, and then if individuals are available, they'll come on and say how long it's going to take them to get to the station. We still use a general alarm tone, which designates a fire or a recall because there's no personnel in the station. In that aspect, just bear in mind that 2 shifts right now due to paramedic training where we have individuals going to school are operating at 7-man staffing, still maintaining a 6-man minimum, so we have to pay overtime to backfill if we go below that where individuals request leave. To give you an idea, a personnel overview for this coming year, firefighter, basic EMT, Western Rivers, he's taking a job with fire department out of state. We've known this for a long time. In that aspect, we prepared for it through the budgetary process. We planned ahead and we hired an individual early. We sent him to fire school to get their training. He completed his training on December 17th of 21. He's on shift now. And in that aspect, when firefighter Rivers leaves, Kyle Howard, who we hired, will take his place, and that'll keep us at the 8-man staffing, and we'll have them already trained ahead of time. Along that line, we're also preparing for a vacancy as a lieutenant's position will become vacant within the first quarter of this year. In that aspect, civil service, through their testing process, posted it last Friday for the testing process to begin with that individual. Hopefully will be in place by April 1st. What that will do with that, and we're going to start that class for 2022 for firefighter training at the Ohio Fire Academy is actually February 14th, and we're not going to make that. So the next class would start in May. So if the individuals we hire do not have their fire training, as soon as we can get them in is in May. To give you an overview of calls for service, in 2021, the division responded to 3,119 runs. That's the highest number of runs in the department's history. This was an increase of 500 runs over the last 2 years. The breakdown of that, if you look at the breakdown in red there, it's 2,539 EMS calls in 21 and 580 fire calls. Of those 580 fire calls, 17 were structure fires within our response area. We had no firefighters injured during these emergency operations. And as of this afternoon, we were at 236 calls for service so far this month. Division personnel arrive on scene 87% of the time within 8 minutes from time of dispatch till on scene time. And this time is figured as non-emergency or emergency. We don't do all calls as emergency responses, so it's a breakdown of both emergency and non-emergency times. The one number that affects us the most, and I've given you some handouts there, your next 2 pages should be like page 4 and 5, which shows you some run times. Overlapping runs, 30% of the time or higher, we have overlapping runs. What that means is if one apparatus is out of the station with personnel, we get another call before that apparatus gets back in station, and sometimes 3 calls before the first apparatus comes back into station. There's 2 sheets there that I gave you of weekends. I just randomly picked 11/5 of 21 through Monday 11/8 of 21. There was 47 runs that weekend. And 22 of those runs were overlapping, so about 46% of the runs were overlapping. If you look on the column on the right that's highlighted, It gives you an idea of how many personnel were still in the station and then the time frame of how many time or how many minutes it was that those personnel. So second line shows one person left on station for 11 minutes. If you drop down further, you'll see a 0 for 20 minutes and 2 for 40 minutes. What that means is for that time frame, that number of personnel, it was all that was left to make the next call out of the station. And there's 2 sheets there, 2 separate weekends. Gives you an idea. The following weekend was 37 runs, 17 were overlapping, 45% of the time. So that's probably the biggest factor that the division has to deal with is the change where we've evolved from a department that had fewer members on the department relying on personnel coming into the station to backfill to a department that relies on whatever the number of personnel in the station on that day is what's going to respond to most of the calls. And once that personnel depletes, there's no longer anybody to respond, and we're relying more on personnel from other departments responding. And remember, Defiance is the only staff department in Defiance County. The closest other staff department in the county that staffs full-time would be over at Napoleon. So we're drawing resources from other agencies that are going to take time to respond from home to the station to respond to us. So most of the time for structure fires, the way it works out is our staff is on scene at the structure fire for 12 to 15 minutes prior to anybody else responding to assist. So they're kind of standalone for that time frame, and they knew it, and they do a great job of protecting this community with limited staffing. They do what they need to do. We focus a lot on runs, what our run volume is, but you also have to understand that we do all these runs, but at the same time, they still have to maintain on a daily basis. They do station maintenance, vehicle maintenance, inspections, public education programs, and then they also have to keep up their state requirements for continuing education, which takes time to keep up their CEs, which their cards are due every 3 years. So they need to do the training. So it's not just that we're always doing runs. The runs take away from the time to do other things that we can do also. To hit a little bit on succession planning or preparing for future leaders within the division, I gave you a handout at your last page. It gives you an idea from the officers aspect of what we've done with captains and lieutenants to try to prepare them for moving into the assistant chief or chief's position in the future. And with that, 2 years ago in April, we started, we'll be in completing our second year this April. It gives you an idea of, right now we put lieutenants and captains into areas, for instance, training and fire prevention. Captain McQuillan is responsible for those areas, so anything that occurs in those areas, he's responsible for, or the individual that fills those positions is responsible for those areas. We do this every 3 months. We rotate, so everybody gets a different position. By being responsible, I mean if it is a budgetary issue, they have the responsibilities of developing a budget. If it's an expense issue, they have to do the POs and submit them through a process. All only comes through me and sign off, and then goes for the PO approval. On the EMS side, Lieutenant Hobson currently holds that position, so he's responsible for any grants that need to follow through the state for that area. And then also any development of protocols, working with our medical director, the pharmacy board. Anything that falls under EMS, he's responsible for. And also whoever holds that position at certain times of the year has to develop the budget for the upcoming year and present it. Lieutenant Case is overseeing fire. He does the same thing with fire. So anything dealing with fire operations below Lieutenant Case is mechanic Israel Frazier, and he does the maintenance on the vehicle. So Lieutenant Case oversees that position. Under EMS, supplies are firefighter Daniels. He takes care of all supplies that are needed for EMS. And then the QA and QI is the quality assurance for EMS calls, and we run those through the medical director to overview the runs that we run on. And then also we have an internal group of individuals that review the EMS calls. Lieutenant Leffick is the assistant chief's position, in that he oversees everybody below him. with all those responsibilities that go along with it. And again, they were heavily involved in developing this year's budget. They all developed their own budget, had to present it, and then we went through the process of coming to an agreement on one budget. We're doing the same thing with lieutenants position and captain's position for future leaders, firefighters that want to move up in the department. We developed a program roughly 2 years ago also. In that aspect, they presented budgets this year to the officers. If there's changes needed for guidelines, protocols, they have to develop those changes and make presentations like they would when they become an officer. So we've developed that program. We'll see how that goes, and a good indicator of how well we did on that program will be this lieutenant's testing and see how the candidates do in the testing process. The last thing I'd like to leave you with is this is a broad overview of what the department is. There's a lot of things that come into play, and obviously money is always a big consideration for John and the administration to maintain a budget that we can all work within. And for me, it's trying to do what we have to do to meet the demands that are put on the division. COVID threw a big thing at us. We've met those demands, but I don't see it going away. I see the future based upon the run volume that's increasing is going to continue. And we're going to have to do something to address it. Equipment down the road is going to have to be addressed. One of those areas being addressed tonight through the legislation, that in the future we're going to have an aerial, and eventually there's going to be another aerial or go with another engine. So there's a lot of things that have to take place, and as the chief of the division, I have this responsibility to set a direction for the department and try to keep the ship pointing in the right direction. But I'm asking for a strategic planning meeting in the future where we can all sit down and try to look at little pieces of this pie with my officers that actually are on the street doing it and try to address what needs to take place. The reason we're not getting individuals to come back in is you look at the run volume and you're doing 14 or more calls and you're out all night. Your goal is to go home and get a night's rest or be with your family, not come into the station at 8 o'clock the next morning and start right back into it. So we have to look at what we're going to do to address those. So again, putting out the annual report at the end of the week. If you got questions on it, as always, give a call. If you have questions on this, my door's open, but I would sincerely ask for a strategic meeting this year that we can actually sit down and start to identify some of these areas. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions real quick for Chief Wilkins? Mr. Rusty.
2 questions. The first one, how hard is it to replace vacant personnel? And then the second part to it is, are you reaching out to the colleges and public schools to try to recruit people?
Well, to answer the first question is we have more. Last year we had to do 3 tests to get candidates. We don't get the candidates like we used to. I used to advertise for the test, and between police and fire, we get over 100 candidates applying for that. We're lucky to get a list of 10 over the last several tests. I don't think we ever got a list of 10, so it's really hard. Second question is, we go into the schools. I've done programs at the high school level. My staff has went into the schools from the public ed side, talking about recruiting, what you can do as a junior in high school. Go to Fort County, come out of Fort County with your EMT basic, be able to go to paramedic school within your first year and get that education that you need. We've done programs with the college for job fairs, so we're out there. The thing is we put ads in the paper for part-time staff and get absolutely zero, and nobody applies. And it's not just the city of Defiance. It's everywhere. I mean, Tim's here, Tim and I go to chiefs meetings, and every community the same issues we're facing. If you went to the other 11 departments in Defiance County and asked those chiefs from the volunteer side, do you have personnel? They're going to tell you the same thing. Certain hours of the day, we do not have the personnel we used to have. It's just the environment we're in, I think, right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Rusty?
I have one other one. the city is constantly looking to possibly expand its borders, through annexation, so on and so forth. How will that affect, your department?
I think anytime you expand your borders, you put more of a demand on the services, not just, I talked to Jeff, not just fire, but it puts parks, every time you take on a new park or you develop a new park, it puts a bigger demand on personnel. If you add more streets, it puts a bigger demand on street division. Fire's the same way. You add more structures in the community, which hopefully draws more people or industry, it puts more of a demand for the services. And it will continue, if the community's gonna grow, you would expect that the services we provide the demand on those services are gonna grow also. And that's what's gonna happen in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Wilkins. Next up this evening, we have some special guests. We have the Northwest Ohio Medical Freedom Group who are guests this evening. So if you would come up to the mic and introduce yourselves. Thanks for being our guest this evening.
I'm representing a group called Northwest Ohio Medical Freedom, of which Burke Gordon is the founder. This group was formed in August of 2021 to resist the unconstitutional mandates that were being discussed across the country regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. I'm one of approximately 150 members of this group, including multiple doctors, nurses, teachers, and business people in the Tri-County area. We were alerted about the situation at the library in October 2021 because some people in our group and staff. In September 2021, 3 members from our group, the Northwest Ohio Medical Freedom, sent emails to the director of the library to ask her to reconsider the policy for the staff of getting the vaccine or test weekly and wear a mask. Soon after the board passed the policy in a board meeting, and when we started hearing complaints from the library staff, multiple staff have confided that the work environment and morale has decreased since the implementation of this new policy. One staff said, this is a direct quote, the director questioned how we do our jobs as reference librarians because, quote, the director questioned, let me reread that. The director questioned how we do our jobs as reference librarians because of our stance on vaccines. She said she doesn't know if we can tell fact from fiction. So she questioned our ability to give the public accurate information in general. This policy significantly impacted one employee in particular who submitted religious exemptions against the vaccine and weekly testing. Her exemption was verbally accepted in a person meeting by the library director and the CFO, only to be emailed later that night by the director stating the employee was a public health threat and would be put on unpaid leave indefinitely. This employee has offered to do the following CDC guidelines for the unvaccinated, including hand washing, keeping distance, wearing her face shield, and has even tested bi-monthly for antibodies, of which she has shown in previous tests. The employee was eventually allowed to work from home only 7 hours a week. Even though most of her job can be performed by home, the manager reports she would like her to perform more tasks. The employee's attorney sent a demand letter asking that she be reinstated to her full-time position. The request was denied. The Ohio Civil Rights Commission sent a letter to the library asking for mediation to discuss accommodations, and that was also denied. She has been given the right to sue, but is seeking a less public solution. These events have transpired all while the vaccinated staff at the library had 4 positive cases. How can someone be labeled a public health threat when vaccinated staff can transmit and contract the disease just as the unvaccinated can? Should a library who is not medically entity be given health labels to staff? Even the Defiance County Health Department didn't acknowledge this health label for an unvaccinated individual when the employee contacted them about the situation. It is also worth noting that the Paulding County Library has not implemented a policy regarding vaccine and testing for their staff. The Defiance Library moving forward with this hardline policy was of their own will and not for any state or federal mandates. I do not have a personal relationship with this employee, so that is not why I'm here presenting you this information. I stand here because I see civil rights being violated, a slippery slope of precedent being set, and a device policy being put into place in the library in my hometown. I'm concerned about my community member being treated this way, an institution supported by my tax dollars, the tax dollars of those here, and Defiance County at large. I presented you the main points, but if you'd like to see copies of this employee's exemption or any communication with the library director, we can provide that. Thank you for your time and considering regarding the situation and the impact it could have on the city of Defiance. The people in this group are excited to see what you can do to restore the position of this employee and investigate how the library can create better working environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And because we are recorded and on the air, would you mind stating your name?
My name is Francisca.
And your last
Do
name?
you want Hall?
Hall. It's nice to have you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Hall? Well, thank you for being our guest this evening.
Thank you.
With that, I reviewed the index minutes for the city council meetings of January 4th and January 11th. Do we have a motion to amend the index minutes as presented for January 4th? Or amend the index minutes for January 11th? Without any, I will approve them. Do we have any liaison meeting requests or reports? Okay. Without any, do we have any comments from council? Mr. Wexler?
We talked about this last year, and I seen it again this weekend. Sidewalks out north, people are walking on Clinton Street. They're not cleaning their sidewalks at all out there. None of the businesses are. I don't know if it's something the city, walking down the road in that snow and slush and everything, it's not good out there.
Mr. Dirk was out today looking at sidewalk issues. I'll touch base with him as far as if he's done any enforcement action on the north side in that area. Continues to be a problem, but we'll work through the nuisance process to go out and be aggressively pursuing. This happens, obviously, this is nothing new, but obviously we need to stay on top of it and push forward.
I know last year when we talked about it, the mayor was trying to set a meeting with all of them out there, trying to get them all to just hire somebody to do it. I didn't know if that was ever addressed or.
Well, I think some of them took care of it, some of them didn't, and I think that I'll pursue the issue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I will tell you, I was the one that told Mr. Dirk to stand down today. Last snow stopped sometime yesterday afternoon, so he couldn't go out there.
But Sean, this snow that I'm talking about was Sunday.
It doesn't matter. I can't prove that that's Sunday's snow and not yesterday's snow. In order to prevail in court, it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's not a very good setup.
Or today.
I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
we got 5 inches on Sunday and then, maybe an inch or a couple.
On the north side, but it's citywide, I
Right.
think is.
Yeah,
It is citywide.
It is, but I seen
You know,
people
it's-
walking on the highway. I mean, that's not good,
I had a jogger in front of my bus this morning that, all they had was a headlamp on, so I understand what you're saying when they talk about people walking on the road. It's, those situations, but I think it's citywide as well, and I don't know if it's possible that we could put something on our website, as far as, what our procedure is or the process of 48 hours. I know it snowed this afternoon, so it's difficult to follow up, I should say 24 hours, but,
neighborly like they used to be either. So I know the 24 hours is a real hard thing to kind of know when the snow starts or when the snow ends, and do you start with the 24 hours and then you get another snow? So I don't have an answer, but maybe we need to look at that ordinance a little bit more and see if there's something that we need to tweak on it. Just saying. And then I received 7th living of the great-great-great-granddaughter of Judge Alexander Peasley Laddie. Of course, she was concerned about the auditorium, and she had been told that we were going to be tearing the auditorium down. And I told her that is not true. I'm not sure where she got her information, but she was excited to hear that, since she is part of the Peasley Laddie, done something with the 1918 building and the auditorium. But she was inquiring about the sign on Veterans Grove, because it's really called Laddie's Grove. And I know she said she had talked to the mayor maybe about a year ago about seeing if even on the Veterans Grove, Veterans Park sign, if they could put something on there, you know, used to be called Laddie's Grove. I don't know. It's always been Veterans Grove or Veterans Park, I think. People just called it Laddie's Grove, if I am correct on that.
You may be. I think I think the name
Was always Veterans. I think so too. And then she also said that when she had talked to the mayor, he was going to, I didn't really understand, so she talked for a half an hour, but something about that with the 1918 building that they wrote off, that he was going to help take care of the Bailey Mausoleum at the Riverside Cemetery as far as helping to clean the marble, because he had a cleaning company. So anyhow, I'm just giving you this information. Hopefully I can talk to the mayor about this.
He's probably listening to it.
He's probably going, oh my gosh, Jill, you know. But I have her email address, I have her phone number. She said she would really like to converse with the mayor again. She was very nice.
You can give it to me. I'll be glad to place it on his desk.
She just wants the Laddie name to stay here, the Peasley Laddie name, and I understand that. So.
Sure.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
Sent out a letter to some of the businesses informing them of what their obligation was to maintain their business properties.
Right.
There's sidewalks out on the north side. There's some that basically were good stewards about that and took care of it. And there's others, when you look at it, you have to do the big round around so that people get past what should have been cleaned. I think one thing that comes up with weather as it changes and predictions and so on and so forth, maybe we need to be proactive in getting something out of a reminder of, and then usually we're fighting for about a week and trying to, get through it. But it might not be a bad idea maybe to reach out to some of the businesses out north side of maintaining their property. And the other one is just a general notice to the public, do walk it, and they don't have to climb mountains to get around one other one. Master Sidewalk Management Plan. I think we talked earlier within the last month and a half about East 2nd Street and islands and trying to get across the East 2nd Street as safely as possible. Do you have a projection down the road where maybe we could have a discussion on that line in regards to what would be a projection towards a master sidewalk plan on areas that we might want to look at that for safe travel, destination, to connect with destination locations, so on and so forth, and then also how those things can be funded.
I think we should be identifying sidewalks that I would consider to be connectors. And we had talked about the time of South Clinton Street and whether or not we were going to pay for that, or were we going to pay for other sidewalks. And I think that as we move forward with the sidewalk program, it does fall into different categories. It falls into categories where you see residential neighborhoods that have sidewalks, and our code states that the property owners are responsible for those. We have no sidewalks, but we want to create sidewalks that create destination places that are on major thoroughfares. And I'll bring a report. When you talk about, if you're talking about timeline, I'll sit down with our administration and we will give you a better time frame as to when we're gonna submit that. Because I think this is something that's obviously been discussed and talked about for a very long time. I've years ago put together a program and synopsis of different gateways into the city, and we talked about where we needed sidewalks. For example, on Ralston Street, the sidewalks go so far. They should extend out to the hospital, they don't. There are a number of different areas and gateways within the framework of this city that as we move forward in trying to create that connectivity piece and creating the kind of infrastructure that allows people to get off the roadways. I mean, Mr. Waxler, you said it best when, hey, they can't walk on the sidewalks, they have to walk out on the streets. Well, we have places that, hey, they have to walk in the street because there's no sidewalks. And I think that those are fair. I mean, I think that's what we should be looking at, is adopting a plan to strategically say, this council would like to do this, this, and this. And whether or not is pieces and destination places to destinations, whether it's down Stadium Drive, whether it's to the hospital, whether it's on the east side and creating the kind of infrastructure that people can cross safe.
As a